Alright guys, how we doing? So in this tutorial we're going to be looking at those acid, electro, almost trancey style synths that you hear in a lot of tunes that are produced today. So we're looking at sounds that wouldn't be out of place on a record that you'd see on something like Limousine Dream or Nuances to Nuit. Think about artists like T-Jax and Ossibel and that sort of sound. And I'm just going to sort of give my take on it really. We're going to look at a little bit of sound design techniques that we can use in order to achieve those sorts of sounds. I've put together this track especially for this tutorial, and I'm going to look at the way that we can write little lead lines that sort of bounce off each other really well. I'm going to talk about some of the VSTs that you can use to get these sorts of sounds. And I'm going to talk you through this whole project, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start something completely fresh, and we're going to build some synth parts from scratch that are in this particular style. So I had a few requests for this video. I thought it was a really good idea, so I wanted to cover it. So first of all, I'm just going to play you the loop that I've got here, the track, and then we're going to just sort of break down each of the synths and just have a look at how they're all put together. Okay, so there's quite a few different synth layers that all work together to achieve that sound, and they sort of vary. Majority of them are just sort of lead parts. So you've got those 5 lead channels there. There's 2 different organ layers, and then we've got these 2 synths here which utilize a feature that you'll find in most synths that's called glide, where the notes sort of bend into each other, the pitch bends into the next note. So that's a technique that you hear a lot in this sort of style, and I'm going to just show you the examples of that when we get to those parts. But in terms of the synths that I've actually used for this, I've used the Chord Monopoly because that's based on the old synth, which has got some really nice sounds in. And to be honest with you, when I'm sort of coming up with these sorts of lead parts, I'm not necessarily going in there and building them myself. I do a lot of preset surfing. There's usually a particular sound I have in mind, and it's just a case of flicking through multiple different VSTs and going through the presets in them and then tweaking from there really, and applying processing. I think that's a really good place to start. And you don't necessarily need to go in and just sort of build all of these patches from scratch. There's lots of places online that you can get preset packs if you're looking to expand your collection of presets, but most VSTs come with some really cool presets, so you can just get stuck in straight away when you're writing, rather than just sort of spending a lot of your time in the writing process working on sound design. I'm just going to take you through each of these. I've used the monopoly for it, for the chords and the pad. We've also got this gated synth element. Now, for a lot of the sounds in this track, I used the Roland Cloud SRX Dance Tracks VST, which is really good actually for this sort of sound. There's a lot of like techno and pulsating kind of gated presets that are really cool. So for the gated synth, I've actually got the SRX Dance Track, and then I'm using this gate here, which I'll get to. There's a phaser flanger on there. I put a bit of compression on just to control the transients a little bit and to make sure that it's, because there's a lot of processing happening, that it's all sort of at a decent level and there's nothing jumping out. Bit of delay on there, EQ, and then I've had vintage verb on there, and I've used the audio effect rack for that, and I'll explain why I've done that too. With the different lead parts, again, I've used the SRX Dance Track sort of preset for it. Again, the lead, another SRX Dance Track preset. Mini V3 there from Arturia I've used for that lead part. Mini V again, and Mini V again there. And again, SRX Dance Track for the organs, both layers. And they're both the glide presets. One of them's the SRX Dance Tracks again. And then we've got this glide preset, this glide, which I've added to one of the presets in Mini V. And then this effects synth from Dance Track. And then for the bass parts, I've actually used one of the synths that comes with the UVI Vintage Vault, which is a really good sort of synth package that you can get online, which I got on a Black Friday deal towards the end of last year. So there's like a bass sort of leady part, and then there's a mid layer to it, and a mid and like a sub as well. So there's 3 different layers that sort of work across the whole frequency spectrum there, really. So it's a nice full sounding bass. So I'm just going to get stuck right into each of the layers. I mean, the first one is the chords. So I'll just solo that. Just a really simple chord layer, and what I've done is I've used the random chords generator for this. I've shown this quite a lot in the videos that I've done, but it's just a really cool way to get some nice chord progressions. And I've just got simple minor chords selected there, and the track's in like a D sharp minor, so I've turned the scale on and I've just made sure that all the chords that I'm playing are going to be within the D sharp minor scale. And if you sort of solo that with all the drums, it fits within the groove really nicely, and that's something to think about. But as we're going through each of the elements, it's also a case of looking how things bounce off each other as well. So if I was to just play that with the drums, it just sort of fits in with the groove. We've also got this pad layer as well, and I've used a filter for this, and I've taken out all the low end really. So and then I've given it a bit of a push around this frequency area, 1200 hertz, just to bring out that detail in that sort of area. And again, I've just used the chords generator. I've done a D sharp minor again, but I've just got a held note for this, and so those together. Really simple. And in terms of the actual sounds that I've used for this, I've just gone in, and in the program browser on the Monopoly, you can just sort of go in by category. And if you go into the pad string section, I've just used this Pinky Skies preset here. And then in terms of like the things that I might do in terms of sound design to tweak this, is I might start to look at filter. So I may bring the cutoff down a little bit if I don't want it as open, or maybe if it's got like a low pass filter on and I want some of the detail bringing out, I might bring the cutoff up a little bit. Same with the resonance. It's just a case of tweaking and just sort of experimenting and see if you can shape the sound a little bit, really. But there's absolutely nothing wrong, in my opinion, with just going in and using presets, because it's what you do with them. It's the notes that you're playing and the way that it all fits together within the context of the track that's the important thing. And so I would say don't get too bogged down with like creating your own patches and things like that, unless that's what you're into. But presets is a place that I usually go to start. So yeah, we've also got obviously like the amp here, which we could change the attack and things. But with a pad, generally you want like a slightly slow attack, so it opens out a little bit, and quite a bit of release on a pad as well. So yeah, there's those layers, and then we've also got this gated synth as well. So it's got quite a lot of movement in it, and that's down to the processing that I've used. So if I was to just go on here now and just talk you through a little bit, there's a bit of automation on it. I'll just turn everything off, and then I'll add things one by one so that you can hear the impact that that's having on the sound. So if I was to just solo the sound on its own, it's quite basic really, isn't it? So it's just an acidy type sound. It's quite harsh, but I've just gone into this SRX dance tracks. But going into the category on here, if you're looking for this type of sound, there's this techno synth category on the synth itself. So in there, I've just used this bandpass filter sweep preset because that's the sort of source sound that I'm looking for to get that sort of trancey acid electro synth that I'm going to apply a gate to in a second. Not much tweaking in terms of that because I'm going to process it in my own way afterwards. But this plugin, if you're looking for those type of sounds, is really, really good. That's basically the preset I used. If you look at the automation, I've got some automation happening with both the cutoff and the resonance of the filter. So you'll hear that if I play it. And that happens each time. Just to give it a bit of movement. And then if we add this gate on, basically what I've done is I've created this sidechain channel here at the top, which is just it's a drum rack with a ride symbol on it. It doesn't matter what you're using to trigger the sidechain, but I just used like a ride symbol here, which is just playing like 16th notes constantly, all at the same velocity. And then I've turned the channel off, and I've got like this gate plugin here, and I'm taking this the signal from the sidechain. So I've called this sidechain, which is just the ride symbol, just going like this. So if I was to just play, so you're not going to hear that, but it's just triggering this this sidechain here. And then you sort of just tweak the settings so that you get this like gated sound. And that's just one of the ways that you can get this gated synth. You can also record it in as audio, and you could sort of go in to the settings. You could choose preserve, and you could go in and do like 16th notes, and then choose this and then bring it down. That'd have exactly the same effect. But if you wanted to do it with just VSTs without having to bounce things down as audio, this is just one of the ways that I've sort of found that you can create that gated style synth. And also I've added in like a flanger, which is going to give it some stereo movement. Just gives it that sort of trancey feel. I've applied a compressor just to control things a little bit. I've used Ozone's vintage compressor for that. And that just sort of keeps things nice and compact, so that you've not got anything sort of poking through transient wise, and you're just keeping all the peaks around the same level, so nothing's jumping out, and you know, we have got that massive amount of dynamic range. And then I've also applied a delay to it, just so we're filling out the gaps in between the spaces a little bit. And then finally, I've added in this audio effect rack, which has got a reverb on it. And sometimes I do this with audio effects on the chain rather than using a send, because I feel as though you can sometimes get a better control over the effect. So if I was to pull this chain all the way down there, that's just going to be completely dry. But I've added in an effect rack, I've added in this vintage verb, and you can slowly mix it in. And you've got just more of the dry signal, I think, so you can keep that up front, but it's also got this sort of copy. So it's a bit like a wet dry, but I sometimes find it a little bit more, you've just got more control over the volume of the effect that you're using actually when you do it like this. So all you do to actually have that is you can search for audio effect rack, and it's just in the utilities. You just drag it on, and then you drag in your effects VST. So say for example, if I was just going to do a reverb, I'll just use Ableton's reverb for this, and drag that onto there like that. And then if you click this button here, you'll have, that's your dry signal. And then if you right click create chain, then you can control how much reverb is used, and you can just sort of use it as like a dry wet. So that's sometimes a good thing to do. But anyway, we'll move on. So there's your gated synth with the pad and those chords. This is how it sounds. With those three elements alone, we're sort of filling the space quite a bit there, but we need some leads to sort of carry the main melodies. So we've got these different layers. So I'm just going to solo all the leads, and we'll just go through them all, and then I'll show you how they're put together. And then we've got these parts here as well. So you've got this little lead bit. That little lead part. And then we've got these three leads from the Mini V. And this is where the position of stuff starts to come into play a little bit. So you've got that call and response. Now, this is almost like the question. And that's your answer there. So they're bouncing off each other. And actually, what I did, and this is a good way to do things, is just write an original melody out like this. So that's how it was originally, and then I just took the last section and played the last section on a completely different synth. So it becomes like a response rather than just part of a main melody. And then with everything else in the track, and then you've got the pads and the chords in there as well. So basically, in terms of actually how I put together those parts, we've got this lead part. Again, I've used the SRX dance tracks for this. So there's no right or wrong way in terms of like sound selection. You're just going through patches really to sort of find something that sounds like what you're after. And again, I've gone in the techno synth presets, and it's called Steam Rocks, this preset. So it sounds like that. I've got a filter on, just filtering out some of the top end. There's a bit of delay on there, but nothing too fancy in terms of the processing. I've got the Ableton scaler plugin on here. So if you go to your MIDI effects and you go to scale, drag on, depending on what your track's in, whether it's in major or minor, or if you're using some crazy scale, which you absolutely should experiment with. In this case, just to keep it simple, I just use minor. It's D sharp minor. And I know that whatever notes I play are going to be within that scale. So I'll just stick that on a channel. I'll keep the loop going. And I'll just sort of play in on the keys loads of different melodies, pick my favourite ones, and then sort of think about how I can add in different elements. And again, no right or wrong answer in that area, but these plugins and these sort of like scalers and this random chords generator just allows you to just stay within key without having to know any music theory. So you can't play a wrong note. So it's all just down to rhythm and just being creative on the keys and just coming up with something that works. So that's the first lead part. The second lead part pretty much follows the same pattern. I'm just going to remove those off there because they're just disabled. Within the SRX dance track, this is just another preset. I've got a delay on there. Again, I've used the minor key, but what I've done this time is I've used a pitch and I've pitched this down a fifth. So it's going to be playing slightly differently. Third lead, I've used the Mini V3 for this. So another really good synth. I've just used a vibraphone preset on there, and I've just put an EQ just to roll off some of the low end. I have panned these slightly, so especially if you've got a question and answer, it's good to pan them. And then we've got this fifth lead, which is again from the Mini V3, and it's just an electric piano, this one. So really simple stuff. There's no magic involved. It's just about having the right VSTs there just to be able to achieve that sound that you want. I've got so in the SRX dance tracks as well, if you go to the categories, you've got this organ section, and I've just used this like clubbed organ preset on there. So I'll just solo those organs for you so you can hear how they sound. With everything else in the main section. So yeah, really simple. I've got a bit of delay on that first one. I've just a bit of EQ just to roll off some of the low end. And then this second one I've processed slightly differently. So I've got a bit of mid-side thing going on here just to sort of bring it out a little bit in a different way. Mid-side processing is something I'll do a separate video on. But it just means that you can treat the stuff that's in mono and the stuff that's in stereo differently. So if you EQ things like that, you can get some more width and you can get some interesting sounds. But again, I've created this audio effect chain, and then I've used the Valhalla delay on this. And there's like a tape delay. So on this second organ, you can hear that the pitch is changing slightly. So with tape delay, you get almost like this flutter just because it's analog. Quite often you'll get this sort of fluttering of the pitch, and I just thought that sounded pretty cool. Makes it sound a bit more analog, and with it being a different synth part, it sounds like, you know, there's more going on, there's more variation, whereas I could have just played all of this line on there. But again, we've got this same call and response. We've got this first organ part playing a certain melody, and then that's the answer to the question there, the response. So that's what the main thing is, just having these different synths talking to each other, really. There's loads of different ways that you could do that. When we go on to sort of creating another one, you'll see how I put it together, and that might be useful. But yeah, then we've got this glide synth here, which is like it's from the SRX dance tracks. So that's just an interesting little part with everything else. And then finally, as sort of like the last sort of lead part here, this is a synth from Arturia Mini V again, which has a lot of glide on it. And it's just a case of tweaking to sort of get the notes to nicely go into each other. But if you're creating like a glide synth, what's good to do is have quite a lot of separation between the notes. So you can see here that that's almost an octave difference. Obviously give or take 3 notes there, but like there's quite a big gap between the low note and then the high note, which gives a bit of this sort of gliding feel. So I'll just play that. So the pitch is bending into the next note rather than it just starting at the right pitch. So it just flows into the next note really nicely. And I'll show you how I did that in this. So if I was to just turn the glide all the way down, you'll hear what impact it's having when I turn it back up. So you've got this glide button here, and most synths will have this on, whether that be like a hardware synth or if you're using a VST. So the glide can be turned on or off here. So if I turn it on and then bring the glide up here, this is the amount of glide. So the notes are sort of just bending into each other, which I think sounds really cool. And you'll hear it in a lot of tracks. There's a lot of producers that make it at the moment that use a lot of glide. Just to whack it right up, you get the extremes, and it takes, this is like the time it takes to achieve the pitch of that note. So sometimes if you do the extreme, and the problem is if you push it too much, you're never going to actually reach the pitch of the note that you're actually playing. So it's going to sound out of tune. So yeah, it's just a case of sort of fine tuning it really so that it sounds decent. Then the last sort of synth layer we've got is this effect synth here, and it's just a tiny little layer. So it looks complicated when you're looking at the project and when you listen, but when you break it down, it really isn't that difficult. You've got lots of different layers, but as long as they've all got their own place in the groove and they're playing within a certain key, and you've got some interesting melodies, there's no real sort of secret. There's no magic to it. It just is a case of building things up element by element and then arranging them and just changing things as you go. So looking at the different sections, if I was to just solo only the synths, so you just got that for the first part. So again here you've got that glide, this glide part speaking to the gated synth. So and then this lead comes into play here. And then you get the answer. And you get the organ coming in and the response. This lead. So here's a really good example. So you've got this glide synth and the organ happening here. And then you've got this glide part responding, and then just at the end this lead comes in. And that happens again. And then at the end of that section you get this lead 4. Second organ part. And that follows, this lead follows the organ. And then we go into a new section here where we've got the chords, the pad, and then these leads that are all sort of working together. So I'll just get the chords and the pad in there. So you've got this lead 5 asking the question, and then lead 3 and 4 answer it. And then you've got the pad and the chords in there for a bit of depth as well. And then we go back into the gated synth with this lead one, organs and the glide part at the bottom as well. And then we go into the breakdown and we introduce something new to fill in the energy that we've taken out by removing the drums in the breakdown. So what we have got is just this new element that we've not heard anywhere else in the track, and this just sort of helps to fill in the gaps. There's lead 4 in there as well. I might as well go through the different bass layers that are in here as well, just in case you're wondering how the bass layers were put together. So got this lead, mid, and then the sub. So it's nice thick sound, and like I said at the beginning of this video, like you've got the lead, which is sort of in your high mids, you've got the mids, which is like lower mids, and then you've got this sub, so it does occupy a lot of the frequency spectrum, which is good because it sounds full and it sounds thick. So just taking you through how this is done. On each of these layers, because they're going to be occupying a similar sort of frequency area as the kick, I've used the track spacer plugin just to dip the frequencies of the kick when that happens, and then you're just making sure that it's grooving and you've not got a lot going on in the low end in the same frequencies. Just starting this lead, I've basically gone into the UVI workstation, which is amazing, and this is based on the Prophet in a high octave basically, so it becomes more of a lead than anything else. So that on its own, but I've taken out everything from like quite harshly from 180 odd hertz, so it leaves room for this, which is again from the Prophet, the PXP10 from UVI. It's like a stereo sounding bass really. What I've done is I've just made sure that because it's in stereo, everything below like 150 hertz is in mono, because you don't really want anything to be sort of really wide below that, to be honest. And then I've got a decapitator on it, and I've just used the thick mild crunch preset and just toned it down a little bit just to give it a bit of grit, so it cuts through in the mix slightly. I mean, it's not fully mixed this loop, but just to give you an idea. And then we've just got this sub layer, which is basically just 2 sine waves. One's pitched down an octave, just to sit with the mid. What I have done though, this has got like quite a short short release rather, so it's just the sort of transient of the bass, and then this sub part is, if you go into the amp here, I've pulled out the release a little bit, so you've got that sub that's happening that's a little bit longer, so you've got the transient of the mid, and then the sub's got a bit more release on it. And then with the lead, and then with everything else. Okay, so that's the loop. Now let's get stuck into making something from scratch. Right, so let's build some synths from scratch then. So I've just kept the same drums from the project before, but I've stripped out all the synths, and I've just loaded in this Rolling Cloud JV 1080, and then just going into the presets, I've gone to category and one called Keep. So looking for that 90s trancey electro sound. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go and I'm going to add in a gate, and I'm going to just sidechain from this channel here that's got the ride on. I take the signal from that, but first of all I'm going to actually draw in the note, but I'm going to add in a scaler on there first, so we know it's going to be in the right key. And let's just do maybe like a C sharp. And I'll draw in like a held note, quite low down, I think. And then we'll play with the gate settings a little bit. So. Cool. And let's just keep building. So I'm going to set a loop and get some melodies in there. So I'm just going to copy this and then I'll go through some different presets. Take the gate off that. So I've copied it over again. I'm just going to change these notes slightly. I'm just doing this really quick for the purpose of the video, but it's just to show you how easy it is just to come up with little bits. And then just change this part a little bit as well, so you've got a bit of variation. And then we go into like a different section maybe. And we'll maybe just have like a pad in there. And for this, I will use the M1 actually. And I will add on the random chords generator onto there. And we're in C sharp minor. We'll go for some strings, I think. Record something in there. So it's just a case of adding in different layers and just fitting them in and making little variations on them really. So sometimes notes can be slightly off. We go in and change them afterwards. And then if we're going for like an acid style synth, another good thing from the Roland Cloud package actually is the actual 303 that comes with Roland Cloud. So when you go in there, you can turn off this position lock to door. You've got these really nice so let's go with that, and then we'll add on a little bit of delay on there. So if we were to just go in like Valhalla for now. Have a little different section to this. Just playing in something random. It's just making them sort of fit with each other so that they're all there's like a call and response basically, something like this. Then we've got those 3 sections and we haven't even got a bass line in there yet, so let's get that bass line in. Tidy it up a bit. And there you go, just in a like 10 minutes you can just knock up loads of different melodies. Obviously it needs a lot of tweaking, but I just wanted to show you how I might go about writing different synth melodies like that. So hopefully that's been useful. If you've got any questions, please just let me know in the Discord. Nice one.